Hello, Kim Knight here, aka the Kiwi Health Detective. And in this podcast, I want to share the 10 not so subtle signs of stress. So I'm going to just turn my video off so that you can focus on the slides. Obviously, if you're just listening to the audio, then you won't be seeing anything anyway. So I want to share the 10 not so subtle signs of stress because if we are stressed all the time, it can lead to more damage down the track. And the problem is that until we get ill, we don't really realize that we're doing any damage. And it's not until we do get ill and then we look back and we go, oh my goodness, the signs were there, but I didn't see them. So here are 10 of my top subtle signs of stress, or what I call telltale signs of stress. I need to get my right. So first of all, before I go into the 10 signs, I just want to explain a little bit about what stress actually is. Now, our body, our autonomic nervous system, can either be in what is called the sympathetic nervous system response, which I call SNS for short, or the parasympathetic nervous response, or PNS. And for the purposes of our talk today, we're just going to be focusing on the SNS. And I like to call the SNS the SOS response, because from an internal physiological perspective, it means that our body is in an emergency fight-flight response. The body feels that there is some danger. And our body is only really designed to operate in the SNS, sort of full-on SNS response, if we are literally in physical danger. It will also go into this response if it feels we're in emotional danger, which is the interesting thing and something that a lot of people don't realize. But when our body goes into the stress response, physiologically, things change inside. Our body chemistry literally changes. And it does that so that it can deal with what it perceives as either a real or a potential or a perceived threat, literally, to our life. In other words, we may literally be in danger of losing our life. And so that's a pretty serious thing as far as our body is concerned. And so what it does is it flips into the SNS response just in a trice, and in a split second it changes how the different systems inside our body are operating. So for example, if we suddenly realized that there was a fire in our living room and we had to get out, then our body will go into sort of auto response to get us out of that danger as soon as possible. And so it will send more blood to the limbs so that we can run really fast. And it will ramp up our nervous system so that we can sense more quickly and acutely. Now, that is all well and good. Obviously, that is a natural response, and we need that natural response. But we're not designed to live in that response. And what is happening today in our Western society is that a lot of people are stuck in this response, but they don't realize they are. And it creates a lot of problems later down the track. And I can speak personally from this. So the SNS, or the SOS as I like to call it, is the sympathetic nervous system response going into the fight-flight emergency response. And in order to deal with the real danger or the perceived danger. And as long as that is temporary, and then our body goes back into the parasympathetic nervous system response, which is more the relaxation response, which is also the response where our body naturally self-heals. It's a calm place to be. It's a place where our mind is very clear, and where our digestion is and our reproductive systems are working properly. We're meant to sort of operate more in that state. But the problem is most people are not in that state for the majority of their waking time and even their sleeping time. So, as I said, why does this matter? Well, according to Harvard research, Harvard University, at least 80% of illness is caused by stress. So after our body has been in the stress response for a considerable amount of time, and this isn't something that happens overnight, this literally is something that builds up over a period of months and years. Eventually, our body will just say, you know what, I can't operate like this. I just can't be pushed like this on an ongoing basis, and I'm going to start to break down. And that's when illness starts to kick in. So why does it matter? It matters a lot, because if we want to avoid serious illness and chronic illness, then we really have to get a handle on our stress. And the interesting thing is, and the problem is that when we're in this stress state, we don't realize it. It just becomes the norm. It becomes our normal way of living. And as I said, it's not until maybe months, usually years later, that the problems start to become apparent. So what is our natural state and what is normal? And what I've discovered is that there is a difference between what is natural for the body and what people think is normal. So most people think it is normal to be rushing around and to be stressed part, or maybe for some people even all of the time. They just think that is normal because it becomes the norm. But that is not the same as what is natural. That is not natural for our body. It does not like to operate in a state of stress on an ongoing basis. And the more you come to experience what it feels like to be in a relaxed state, where the body is relaxed and the mind is calm, the more you will understand this. So it is something that has to actually literally be experienced. This shift has to be experienced at an experiential, internal body-mind level. This is not some intellectual theory. One actually has to start experiencing what does it feel like to feel relaxed. And so you may notice, for example, that you have a relaxing massage. And afterwards, you may have been rushing around for weeks. And at the end of this massage, you just suddenly feel so relaxed. And you may even feel really, really tired, because that's the body flipping into the parasympathetic response. And it goes, oh, thank goodness. They just gave me, my owner just gave me the opportunity to do some self-healing. And now I'm going to just let everything go and relax so that I can do this self-healing for my owner. And then usually what happens actually after somebody's had especially if they're a very stressed person, if they've had a nice relaxing massage, is 5 minutes later they'll be bam, 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 back into being busy again. And then we've wasted all that opportunity for self-healing. So I have had many years of being a stress bunny, or I'm not anymore, I'm happy to say. And even after I'd recovered myself from chronic illness, I realized that I was still very, very stressed. And I became aware of this very underlying, ongoing stress response in my body, which felt like a very subtle vibration going on inside my body. And I realized I needed to do something about it. And I committed the next 3 years to very, very in-depthly, if that's a word, exploring what creates stress and what can I do about it, because I absolutely want to reduce this stress response. And that's what I did. So I'm going to go through these 10 signs, and I'd like you to either say yes or no, yes I do this, or no I don't. And the thing is to be really, really honest, okay? The only person we're fooling if we're not honest is ourselves, and then we do ourselves a disservice. So please be honest and don't judge yourself or beat yourself up if you're saying yes a lot, okay? The most important thing is to become aware of the truth of how things are, and then we can make change. So here's the first one. The first clue is if you talk really, really fast. So I'm not talking really, really fast right now, as you've probably noticed. But when people are stressed or their body is in the stress response, they'll probably be talking really like this, and they'll never give me, and they won't break for a pause for anything, and they'll talk this fast. Okay, now that is a sign that the nervous system is really stuck in the stress response. And I come across a lot of people who talk like this. And the interesting thing is, the more I get calm and the more I turn my stress response off, the more difficult I find it to be talking with people who are talking really, really fast, because it just jitters my nervous system. It doesn't like it anymore. And I notice that the less calm I am, the faster I will talk. So stress clue number 2, there's always a feeling of there's never enough time. I just have too many things, too much on my to-do list, and I never get it done. And I have to rush around all the time. I can't do things in a calm, sort of cool, collected manner. Now, I pondered on this for a long time, and finally came to my own conclusion of why this is. And this is my take on it. When our body goes into the stress response, because it thinks it's in an emergency, it's in danger, it's gone into the fight-flight response, and it needs to get out of danger in order to preserve life, literally, then usually if we're in a real danger, then we have to do it very, very quickly, right? So if you suddenly notice your house is on fire, you're going to have to run out pretty damn quickly. Or if you're just about to walk off, to step off the curb, and you notice that a bus is coming towards you at 60 kilometers an hour, then you're going to have to move pretty quickly, perhaps, to get out of the way of that bus. And so our body knows that in order to implement the stress response and avert the danger, we may have to act very, very quickly. And so my take on this is that the body gets stuck in this place of thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to do everything now, and I've got to do it really, really quickly. Because obviously also, if we're going to get out of danger, and that danger is present right now, then we have to take action right now. There is no time to wait. And so the body is constantly stuck in this feeling of there's never enough time, and I can't slow down. And paradoxically, when we do get into a calm, relaxed state, we will find there is a lot more time, and we will be much clearer and able to think and prioritize and plan and schedule our day. And the only difference is we have gone into a different state. We've gone into a different state of being. And that's another thing I'm going to talk about in a minute, the being versus doing. But this is so fascinating, because literally just by training ourselves to become more calm and relaxed, we find we have more time and we can get things done in a much more productive way. The third clue is that we may find ourselves on emotional roller coasters. If we're in a really calm state, our emotions are also going to be, or much more likely to be, calm. But if our body is continually stressed, where our organs, where the emotions are literally generated from, so for example, anger comes from the liver, and worry affects the spleen, sadness is in the lungs, fear affects the kidneys. Our organs are just, because they're not in such a good physiological state, they're going to be affected much more by emotions. And so it's a bit of a vicious circle. The more emotional we are, the more stress we'll be, and the more stress we'll be, the more emotional we will be. The fourth clue is we may find ourselves eating really fast and not chewing properly, and eating while we're doing other things. So we don't sit down, purposefully and take 15 minutes or half an hour or whatever it is to just literally sit and eat our food and only focus on our food. We'll be doing something else. And a lot of people have a habit of either eating on the run, eating on the car as you drive to work, eating at your desk, etc., etc. Now the problem is our body needs, and our digestive system needs respect for when we eat. It needs us to respect what we're putting in our body how we put it in our body, when we put it in our body, even if we put it in our body. And if we really want our digestion to be working well, then one of the things that we can best do for ourselves is to only eat when we're eating. And I remember a TCM practitioner saying to me once, when you're eating, eat. When you're walking, walk. When you're working, work. In other words, just focus on the one thing that you're doing at that time. But as far as eating is concerned, this is very, very important, because in order for our body to digest our food properly, the digestive system needs to be in a calm state. But if we're really stressed and the stress response is turned on, the body has actually half turned off the digestive system process, and it can't do its job properly. So we have to learn how to eat in a very calm manner, and that's a whole topic for a whole other program which I have on dietary hygiene. So stress clue number 5, when your mind just doesn't stop. It just thinks and thinks and thinks. There's no gap between thinking, and in Qigong we call it the monkey mind. So if you find that you have incessant, non-stop thoughts and thinking going on, and you can't switch off your brain, as people tend to say, then that will be a sign that your nervous system is oversensitized, and that very likely that the stress response is turned on at some level. Because when we actually really experience true relaxation, our mind will be very, very calm and very, very still. And that doesn't mean it can't operate. It doesn't mean that we can't come up with creative ideas. In fact, we tend to come up with even better and creative ideas and be able to tap much more into our intuition. So do you have a mind that just doesn't seem to switch off? Stress clue number 6 is we will have difficulty sleeping. So we may have difficulty falling asleep, or difficulty staying asleep, or maybe difficulty waking up after not sleeping well. And this is because the whole system is oversensitized and on alert, and there's just not enough relaxation at a mental, physical level for the body to fall asleep. And so we'll be thinking and thinking, and just the body's just not in a normal and good rhythm. What is called our circadian rhythm is disturbed, and we can't sleep properly. And the 7th clue is we may well have digestive issues. And I've already touched on that slightly before, talking about the rushed eating. But if we are stressed, our digestive system is half switched off and not able to do its job properly. And maybe the acid-alkaline balance will be out of balance, and the different organs which have to secrete different juices will not be able to do their job properly. And so we may experience IBS, or constipation, or diarrhea, or bloating, or tension. And that will be a sign that our digestive system is inflamed and out of balance. The 8th clue is we may find that we are impatient and irritable and short-tempered. And that is a sure sign that we are stressed and out of balance. And often we can find in TCM that there's often too much heat in the chest, which makes us sort of feel hot and flustered. So if you're finding that you often feel impatient and irritable, then that may be a clue that your body is in the stress response. Clue number 9 is people who are stressed will often be doaholics and workaholics and busyaholics. In other words, they're just always doing and not enough being. So just constantly, from the time they get up in the morning to the time they go to bed, they'll just literally be filling every space in their day with things to do. Now, the interesting thing is we live in a universe, in Qigong terms, we live in a universe of yin and yang. Yin is stillness, and yang is activity. And ideally, we need a balance of the two. Now, obviously, when we're asleep, in theory, if we're sleeping well, then that will be a substantial chunk of our yin time, right? But if you look at it that we have 24 hours in a day, we could say that we have 8 hours sleep. That's a good average amount, for sleep. 8 hours work. Now that would be a good, healthy, balanced amount of work. In other words, we could do less, but not really more. And then 8 hours, there's still 8 hours. So what are we going to do in that 8 hours? That should be our fun time, our relaxation time, our downtime, time to have satisfaction and contentment and fun. Now, workaholics and doaholics will probably use most of those 8 hours to either be working still or to be maybe doing chores and things that need to be done that aren't necessarily fun. And what is really interesting about the body is that we need to have fun, and we need to have things that bring us satisfaction and enjoyment. And if we don't, then our body will also get very annoyed and frustrated and stressed, because we're just driving ourselves too hard, and we're like our own slave driver. And stress clue number 10 is that we just can't stop and be. We just have to do all the time. And you may have heard the phrase, we are a human being, not a human doing. But most people in our Western society are definitely human doings. And I would say I'm still a recovering human doing. One of the reasons that I became ill and was unable to work for 10 years was because I was just driving myself too hard, and in many regards. And so I've really had to learn how to change work-life balance and to de-stress and a lot of other things. Often deal with emotions is a big one, in order to restore balance. So how did you do with these questions? How many did you say yes to? And again, it's good to be honest and just recognize the truth of how things are. So what to do now? Say you haven't ticked 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or even more. What to do now? Well, then it's about becoming aware. It's about becoming aware of what these issues are and then deciding to make changes. So, for example, if you're working 14 hours a day and your body is stressed as a result of that because it's not really designed to be, driven like a machine, then the change has to be, well, I only work 8 hours a day, for example. And that's not necessarily an easy change to make straight away. You might have to go down to 13 and then 12 and then 11 and then 10, right? But changes need to be made. And you can look at each of these 10 issues that I've gone through, and if you've ticked any of those, you just have to ask yourself, what do I need to do to change this habit and to, in order to change the response that my body is giving me as a result of doing this habit. So, for example, one of the habits that I used to have was I would always be running late for appointments. Now, because I was always running late and making myself late, that immediately, automatically put myself into stress. Right? Now, nobody else was doing that to me. That was completely my own habit. And one day I just realized, oh my goodness, I'm always running late for appointments, and that makes me feel really stressed because then I'm having to rush. I'm worrying about being late, and then what will the other person say, and I don't want to upset them, and this whole thing ensued as a result of me running late for appointments. So what was the solution? The solution was to change the habit and get ready earlier to leave for appointments, and that's what I did. And that took, some habit changing, and habits don't change overnight. They take a while to implement and consolidate, but I did it. Another one that I noticed I used to do was I always used to back my appointments. In other words, I never left any space in between appointments. And I recognized that created stress in my body. it caused my body to go into the stress response. And once I recognized that I was doing that habit, I had a choice of that I could change that habit. And that's what I did. I chose to actively and consciously put time in between appointments. Even though it felt really uncomfortable and strange to begin with, that's what I did. And it made a huge difference in my life. So this is what you can do. So if you want to know more and you're interested in more, you can check out my online self-help programs at kimknighthealth.com. You can watch, if you're only listening to the audio of this on the podcast, you can watch the audio visual on my YouTube channel. Just Google Kim Knight Art of Health. And do stay connected. Join me on Facebook, Kim Knight Art of Health. And just check out my website, thekiwihealthdetective.com. I hope this has been useful, and I look forward to chatting again.